In this tutorial, we are going to be creating health bars in pygame. And here's what we are going to be making. We will make two health bars. The first one is going to be a very static one. So it just displays the amount of health you have in a bar. But the second one is going to be animated, meaning that when you gain or lose health, it shows you how much you're gaining or how much you are losing. And both of these are quite easy to implement. So let's jump right in. Alright, so here we are in a very basic setup of pygame. And really nothing happened so far. If I run this code so far, all we can see is a plain window with a white square in the middle that happens to be a pygame sprite, but it doesn't need to be. The only reason I'm using a pygame sprite is because you would usually use that for a main player, and a main player would have the health bar. So this is why I'm using this. But the health bar would also work without this kind of class. But okay, let me close this and let's go through this code really quickly. So we're importing pygame and sys, we are initiating pygame, then we are creating our screen, so our main window. In my case it's 800 by 800 pixels, but it's completely irrelevant what dimensions you have. Choose whatever you want in here. Then we are creating a clock, and then we are creating a player. So this player class, I'm gonna explain that in a second. But we are basically just creating a group single, and instead of that we are creating the player class. So nothing complicated. After that we have our game loop. That doesn't do anything right now. We are checking for closing the game, then we are filling the screen, and we are drawing and updating our player. Then we are drawing the entire thing, and then we control the frame rate. So all of this is super basic pygame. And if I open our player class, in here also nothing difficult is happening. We start by inheriting from the sprite class, then we are initiating the entire thing, we use the super method to get the attributes of the sprite class, and then we are creating an image and a rectangle, so what a sprite class always needs, and then I fill the rectangle, so that we have a white square in the middle. But you could also add a picture in here or really add all the code for your main player. But none of that matters for me, so I just filled it with a white color. And after that we have the update method that right now doesn't do anything. But we do need it because down here we call player update. But alright. So this is a very basic setup. So let's create a basic health bar, the one without animations. And the logic for that one is actually remarkably simple. Effectively, the health bar only has to be as large as our health is, because that's what it indicates. And the health bar also is just a plain rectangle, so we can use pygame's rect class for it. So really all we have to create is a rectangle with the width of our health. And then depending on how much health we have, this bar becomes longer or shorter because its width is defined by our player health. And that's really all we need. So let's implement all of this. So here I'm back in my code. And I first have to create some new attributes. The first one is going to be self.current health. So this is the amount of health we want to track. In my case, I just choose 200, but this is basically random. Then I want to have another attribute that is self.maximum health. So the amount of maximum health we can have. And in my case, I've chosen 1000. But again, this number, you can choose basically whatever you want. And then I need another attribute that is self.health bar length. So this is going to be in pixels how long our health bar is. And in my case, I've chosen 400. So it's about half as long as the entire width of the screen. So these are the very basic attributes we need. But there's one more attribute that we do need. That right now, our health bar length is 400 pixels. So that's a distance. But then we have our maximum health that could be 1000. And our health that is 200. So these two measure our health, and this one measures a distance. So there's some kind of disconnect that we have to make them relate to each other in some way. That when we get to a maximum health of 1000, our health bar should be 400 pixels long. And then when our health is 500, this one should only be 200 pixels long. So we have to make sure that these two attributes relate to this one. So we have to convert our health to the health bar length. But this one is quite easy to get. And I call this attribute self.health ratio. And to get it, all we need is self.maximum health divided by self.health bar length. And this one would convert our health to a distance of the health bar length. You will see in a second what this means specifically, but for now, just take it as it is. So now we have some health, but we don't have any way to influence our health. So all of these numbers are completely static, which obviously is not great. So to fix that, I'm going to create some more methods that can add or subtract health. And the first one is called getDamage. And then here I want our self, that always is necessary. And then I want an amount. So how much damage we are going to take. And in here, what I want to do is if self.currentHealth is greater than 0, then I want self.currentHealth minus equal the amount of damage that we would receive. And we can also add if self.currentHealth is smaller or equal to 0, then self.currentHealth is equal to 0. Just to make sure we don't go below 0. But obviously in a real game, if you come to this state, the player is dead. But, well, for now, it doesn't really matter. So now we have our damage, and then we also need our getHealth. And this one works in the same way. So we have self and we have amount. And if self.currentHealth is smaller than self.maximumHealth, then self.currentHealth plus equal amount. And if self.currentHealth is greater or equal to self.maximumHealth, then I want self.currentHealth to be equal to self.maximumHealth. So really, all that happens in these two methods is that we either add or subtract from our current health, and if it's below 0, we set it to 0, or if it's greater than our maximum health, then we set it to the maximum health. So effectively, all we are doing is we add or subtract and we keep it within a bound of 0 and our maximum health. And with that covered, we need some way to call these two methods, so we can actually test our health bar. And in my case, all I'm going to do is to check if we are pressing up or down our keyboard. But in a real game, obviously, you would want to trigger them in different ways. Like if the player is hit by an enemy or something like that. So in our event loop, if event.type is equal to pygame.keyDown, and if event.key is equal to pygame.keyUp, then I want to call our player group. I want to target the sprite, and then want to call getHealth. And in here you could add in basically any number. I'm going to go with 200. And now I just copied the entire thing. Let me do it properly. And this is going to be keyDown, and it's going to be getDamage. So with that one covered, we have a way to call our health bar. So now we can close this entire thing and never look at it again. And same for these two, just for simplicity, so the code doesn't look too messy. So now we can actually get to creating our health bar. And I am going to create a new method for that. Then I'm going to call basic health. And it needs self as usual. And then in the update method, I'm also going to call self.basichealth. And in here, the actual logic is remarkably easy. All we have to do is to use pygame.draw.rect. So we are drawing a rectangle. And now we need a couple of attributes. The first one is on what surface we want to draw on. In my case, that's going to be screen. So our main display surface. Then we need a color. So 255, 0, and 0, a basic RGB tuple for red. And now we have to create a rect object, all inside of brackets. And the first two attributes are the X and the Y coordinate. So in my case, I just go with 10 and 10. So we are 10 pixels from the top and 10 pixels from the left. Super simple stuff. And now we need the width and the height. And the width is the actually complicated part. Well, it's not really complicated, but that's the really interesting part. But the height is incredibly easy. So let's start with that one. Because all I want is this thing to be 25 pixels high. That's all we needed. So the one last thing is that we have to figure out our width. And really, all I want to have in here is our self.current health. Although this would not work. Well, it would work, but it wouldn't work properly. So let me actually run this thing and let's see if it works. So this is working, but we can go basically as far as we want. Well, we can't go below 0, but it can get as long, or well, it can get very, very long outside of the screen. Which we don't want. We want the maximum health to be 400. So what I want is to divide this thing by self.our health ratio. So that when our maximum health, for example, is 1000, we would divide it by such a number that we get to 400 in the end, our maximum health. So now let's try all of this again. And now I can't go further than this. So, and I also can't go less than 0, so this seems pretty good. But obviously, there's something missing, that I want to have a white bar around this. Or well, you could have it, I think it looks fine by itself already, but let's have a white bar around it. And for that, I'm just going to create a new rectangle, so pygame.draw.rect. We need the same attributes, except this time it's white, so 255, 255, and 255. And for the rectangle this time, I want the same x and y coordinates, but for the width, I want self.healthbar length and the same height. But now I'm going to add another attribute that's going for the width of this thing, which I'm going to set to 4. And let's run this again. There we go. Now we have a proper area around it, and this looks like a pretty useful health bar. And just to explain what happened here, if you call pygame.rect and you add a line width attribute in the end, then pygame is going to draw an empty rectangle just with the line width. So this is what we have done here. But with that, we have our basic health bar. So this is already a really useful basic health bar. But obviously, it doesn't look particularly good. So let's create a more fancy one that looks better. And for that, we are going to need quite a bit more logic. So let me explain what's going to happen. In the most basic sense, we are effectively going to create 2 rectangles for our health bar. The first health bar is pretty much the basic health bar we have already seen. So this is just a health bar that accounts for how much health we have. But then we are going to have a second health bar that shows us the difference between the current health and the health we want to get to. And this one is going to be animated. And how it animates is that we have 2 points of health. We have our current health and we have our target health. And then on every cycle of our game loop, we're going to subtract or add a tiny amount to go from our current health to our target health. And since the second health bar is on top of the first bar, it's going to look like our entire health bar is transitioning. But this isn't actually what's happening. But that's the basic logic. Let's actually implement all of this. So here I'm back in my code. And first of all, I have to add a couple more attributes. The first one, and let me put them in the proper place, is self.target health. And let's set this one for now to 500. And then at the bottom, I want self.health change speed. And I'm going to set this to 5. So this one is going to be how fast our health changes. And this is all we need in terms of attributes. But in our get damage and get health, we have to make some updates. Because now we don't want to change the current health, we want to change our target health. So let me copy target health and change all of this to target health. So that when our player is hit or gets health, we are changing the target health and our current health is going to catch up to the target health. So we never actively change our current health, we only ever change the target health. But okay, now we can close those again. And for our basic health, to keep this one working, I would also have to change this to target health. But I'm going to comment this out anyway, because we're not going to use it anymore. But just in case you want to use it, make sure this is target health, not current health. But okay, let me minimize this as well. And now I want to create another method that I called advanced. health. And it needs self as usual and nothing else. And now no update method. Let's call self.advanced health. So in here, we are going to need a couple of things. So let me go through them step by step. First of all, I'm going to create two variables. The first one's going to be transition width. And this one is going to be 0. And I want to have a transition color. And this one is going to get an RGB tuple. And by default, I'm going to make it red. And let me explain what this means. You remember earlier when I said we are going to create two health bars? This one, transition color and transition width, are going to be the width and the color of the second health bar, the one that's supposed to be animated. But by default, our transition bar should be invisible. And to make it invisible is to give it a width of 0 and a color of red. So the same as our actual health bar. So effectively what is happening is that our second health bar is always technically on the screen, except that when there is no change to the health, it's not visible. But we do need the variables nonetheless. But now we come to the actually interesting bit. You calculate the difference between our current health and our target health. And this is going to be an if statement. That if self.current health is smaller than self.target health, then we want to do something. And what we want to do is self.current health plus equals self.health change speed. So really all that happens is if our current health is smaller than the target health, we want to add a certain amount to our current health. In this case, it's going to be 5. And this keeps on happening as long as the current health is smaller than the target health. And while that is the case, I want to influence our transition width. So this one here, by default it's 0, but when there's a difference between current health and target health, this has to be different from 0. And this one should be an integer, so I put all of this in there. And really all I need is the difference between our target health and our current health. So this one is just going to be self.target health minus self.current health. And as always, we have to divide it, just like the basic health bar, by our health ratio. So I'm going to put all of this again into brackets and divide it by self.health ratio. So this entire line is giving us the width between our current health and our target health and makes it relative to the health bar. And then for the final bit, we have to change the color of the transition bar. So right now it's red, and in this case we are gaining health, so I want to make this green. So transition color is going to get an RGB tuple that is plain green. So 0, 255, and 0. And this is all we needed for adding health. Now I can copy the entire thing and add the logic if we are losing health. So if our current health is greater than our target health. And if that is the case, instead of adding our health speed, we are subtracting it, or health change speed. And this line here actually remains exactly the same. And this would still work for the simple reason that rectangles can have a negative width. So in this case, let's say our target health is 500 and our current health is 800, and this thing would be negative 300. It would just go to the left instead of to the right. And the last thing we need is to change the color to yellow. So this would be 255 for red, 255 for green. And we'll leave blue as 0. So this RGB tuple would end up as yellow. And with that part covered, we are actually almost ready. So really all we have to do now is to use all of this information and create two rectangles from it. And the first rectangle is basically the same that we have created earlier. So really similar to this line here. Except this time I don't want the line to become too long. So I'm going to create the rectangle first by itself, and then I'm using the rectangle to draw the actual health indicator. So I'm going to create a health bar rect variable. And this one is going to be pygame.rect. And in here, we again need an x and a y coordinate. For the x, I'm going to go with 10. And for the y, I'm going to go with 45. So it's slightly below the original basic health indicator. And then again, we have the width and the height. The height, again, is just going to be 25, because this one is super easy. And for the width, we have to do the same thing we've done earlier. So it's going to be self.current health divided by self.health ratio. But now we are going to need another health bar. And that's going to be the transition bar rectangle. And here again, I'm going to create a pygame.rect. And now we need a couple of attributes. So we need the X and the Y coordinate, then we need the width and the height. So let's go through them step by step. We know why this one is the easiest. This one is going to be 45, exactly the same as our health bar. And the same applies to the height. This has to be 25. So the height and the Y are super easy to do. But now for the X, we need to make a slight change. That we don't want this bar to start at the beginning of the bar. We want it to start wherever our health bar ends. And this one we can do with healthbar rect.right. So that this bar is always supposed to start where our actual health bar ends. And this is going to be the right of the health bar. And this one we can target super easily. And finally we need our width. And this is what we calculated here. So this is always going to be this transition width. So all I have to do in here is transition width. And with that, we have our two rectangles. So now all that's left to do is to actually draw the two. So I want pygame.draw.rect. It's going to be screen. Then I want the color for the actual health bar is going to be 255, 0 and 0. So it's going to be red. And then I have the health bar rect. So this is our actual health bar. Then I have pygame.draw.rect. It's going to be screen. And this time we are drawing the transition rectangle. So this one needs this transition color. So I just copy it. And since we are setting this at every stage, it's going to have different colors. And now for the actual rectangle, this is going to be transition bar rectangle. And now finally, I want to create the same outline again that we created for the basic health. So the white frame around it. And for that, I need pygame.draw.rect. It's going to be screen. It is going to be white. So 255, 255, and 255. And now I have to create a new rectangle. That's going to be 10 pixels from the left, 45 pixels from the top. It is going to be self.health bar length. And it is 25 pixels high. And again, we need a pixel frame of 4. So this line here is exactly the same as this line here, except now it's a bit further down. But all right, let me run this and see if it's working. So we don't get an error message, and this already looks pretty good. So now I can go up and down, and even in the process, looks pretty good. And since I fixed our self.basic health, this one should also work. So let's try both of them together. And yeah, looks pretty good. Arguably, the health change is quite slow, so you might want to speed this one up a tiny bit. But I think by itself, this one seems pretty good. So hope that was helpful, and I'll see you around.